Can a single night in a hotel change the lives of two complete strangers forever? On an early winter night, the city of Chicago lay quiet under a thin veil of mist blanketing rooftops and sidewalks that shimmered under soft lights. In front of the Luxor Heights Hotel, the main revolving doors turned slowly, almost as if cradling each step that entered. No one paid attention to the tall, slender, middle-aged man whose face was hidden beneath a worn knit hat and a coat faded with time. He carried a thick canvas bag, his back slightly hunched, his eyes tired yet steady. No one knew that this man was Elijah Monroe, the founder and CEO of one of America's most luxurious hotel chains. Elijah wasn't here to be greeted with fanfare or special treatment. He had arrived quietly, without a secretary, without security, without a name tag. 18 years ago, he had sketched the first architectural design for this very Luxor Heights branch with his own hands. But it was also here, amid a flurry of performance reports and profit charts, that he felt something vital had slipped away. The reason he entered hospitality in the first place, not for profit, but for people. Elijah stepped into the lobby, silently taking in the soft golden light cast across the red carpet, the faint jazz music drifting from the bar's grand piano, and the gentle scent of aromatic candles blending into an air of elegant detachment. He paused before a rusted steel sculpture, a raw, unfinished piece he had once purchased from a young artist rejected by every gallery in town. The statue was rough, imperfect, but real. Just like him in the early days, thin and full of dreams in a rented room on the outskirts of the city. As he approached the front desk, a young woman with a gentle smile and a crisp uniform stepped forward. Her name tag read, Sienna Green. Elijah said nothing of who he truly was. He booked the room under the name Eli Monroe, a single room on the 10th floor. Sienna had no idea that the man before her was the creator of the very hotel she served. Elijah accepted the key card and made his way slowly toward the elevator. As the doors closed, the metallic surface reflected the image of a weary man, nothing like the polished CEO who often graced magazine covers. But Elijah knew exactly who that man in the mirror was. It wasn't a stranger. It was himself, from years ago. And something deep inside told him that tonight, something would happen that would change the way he saw the world forever. After leaving his luggage in the room, Elijah didn't lie down on the smooth white-sheeted bed he once personally approved. Nor did he pull back the curtains to admire the glowing Chicago skyline. Instead, he returned to the ground floor, walking along the granite-tiled hallway to a small cafe nestled in the hotel's west corner. It was nearly 9 o'clock. The guests were sparse, and the soft amber light cast a quiet stillness, as if whispering only to those who knew how to listen. Elijah ordered a black coffee with no sugar, then chose a seat tucked away in a dim corner where the light didn't fully reach his face but allowed him to observe every movement in the space. The gentle clinking of spoons on porcelain rang out softly, the whispers from nearby tables barely more than a breeze skimming across still water. He took a sip of the hot coffee, the bitterness settling slowly before fading quickly. And it was then that he heard it. A low, quiet female voice rose from the table behind him. Not loud, clearly not meant for anyone else to hear. "You can sleep in the car if you want, but today is our anniversary. I just want one thing, to feel normal." Elijah froze. He didn't turn around, only tilted his head slightly by instinct. In that moment, time seemed to pause. The voice was not sorrowful or dramatic, yet something in it made his chest tighten. A yearning so simple, yet carrying an overwhelming weight of sadness. The man sitting with her responded in a low, husky tone. "We were going to stay at my cousin's place, but the gas leak forced the whole building to evacuate. Every hotel nearby is fully booked. This was the only place with a vacancy." Elijah didn't know who they were, nor did he see their faces clearly, but he could feel the weariness in every word. Not the kind that comes from a long day, but the exhaustion of people who have had to carry themselves for too long in a world that leaves no room for the soft-hearted. He lowered his head, his hand tightening around the porcelain cup as if trying to steady himself, and when the woman repeated her words, this time with a slight catch in her throat, "I just want to feel normal." Just for one night. Elijah felt a sudden, strange ache rise within him, as if he were hearing a piece of his own past he had spent years trying to forget. And he knew then, tonight would not end with him sleeping in a room on the 10th floor, because what he had just heard was not a complaint. It was a reminder of something very old, yet never truly lost. Elijah sat motionless, his eyes fixed on the steaming cup of coffee before him, but his mind had long since left the warm room. The woman's words from the table behind him still echoed faintly, each syllable striking against his chest like a quiet drum beat. It wasn't because their story was tragically unique, but because it was painfully simple, heartbreakingly honest. In that quiet sigh, he suddenly found himself back at 21, sleeping in an old pickup truck parked outside a 24-hour bakery on the outskirts of Peoria. The cold seeping through his thin coat, the musty smell of the back seat upholstery, the shame of lying to his friends that he was just staying at a family friend's place. It all rushed back as if it had never left. He remembered once, only once, spending his last $30 to rent a cheap motel room in the worst part of town, not for himself, but for his mother. She had just finished her first round of chemotherapy, her skin sallow, hands trembling. Elijah wanted her to have one night free of mosquito bites, free of the neighbor's noise, free from the sagging bed that bent her back. Just one night, so she could still feel like a person, just like what that young woman had whispered moments ago. One night to feel normal. And he suddenly realized that feeling, that longing just to be human in a world that demands so much, had never really left him. It had only been wrapped beneath layers of titles and achievements. Elijah tilted his head just slightly, enough to catch her reflection in the glass across from him. Her brown hair tied neatly back, the worn wool coat smoothed flat by her hands. She didn't hunch, didn't lower her gaze. She sat upright, eyes distant, not afraid, but filled with something invisible called resilience. Elijah looked at her as if seeing his mother all those years ago, or worse, the woman he once promised to love but lost because he was too consumed with meetings and expansion plans. A soft scrape of a chair broke the stillness. The man stood up, likely heading to the front desk to ask about checkout times. Elijah didn't move. His eyes followed the woman left behind, her hands gently cradling a glass of water as if afraid she might break something fragile. In the silence between them, the guest and the stranger, something began to stir within him. It wasn't fleeting emotion, it was responsibility. Elijah Monroe realized he could no longer remain an observer. Not after his heart had been awakened by a single gentle voice behind him. Elijah left the cafe as the clock neared 10 p.m., but he didn't return to his room. Instead, he wandered slowly through the ground floor hallway, as if needing more time to sort through everything he had just heard. His mind couldn't let go of the image of the young woman with eyes full of quiet strength, a woman whose name he didn't know, but whose presence had already etched itself into his memory. His footsteps led him to the mezzanine level, where a series of black and white photographs documented the construction of Luxora Heights from its earliest days. In front of one old frame, Elijah stopped. The picture showed him, barely in his 20s, carrying a mattress up to the second floor with bare hands. His face was smeared with plaster dust, hair disheveled, shirt soaked in sweat, but in his eyes was something he had long since lost, the belief that every person deserves a decent place to rest. Back then, the hotel was nothing but a bare concrete shell, without elevators, without a grand lobby, certainly without a champagne bar on the rooftop. But he remembered clearly that very first night, after finishing the first 3 rooms, when he saw an elderly woman step out of an old taxi, her hands trembling as she held the key to room 103. He had told himself, "I'm not just building a hotel. I'm rebuilding trust for people who need it most." And now, nearly 30 years later, he couldn't have imagined that right here, in the very place that once was his dream, a woman like Elise Bennett would have to mask her exhaustion by smoothing out the wrinkles of an old coat before lifting her head to face the world. Elijah stood in front of the photo for a long time. The young man in the picture looked nothing like him now, but the eyes were the same, steadfast, quiet, and yearning to witness something good and real in the world. A cold breeze swept through the hallway and made him shiver, not from the temperature, but from a realization. If he, the founder of this place, could overlook two people clinging to their last shred of dignity in silence, then all the years he had poured into this so-called journey of success would mean nothing. And for the first time in many years, Elijah no longer thought about profits or growth reports or the next investment round. He thought only of one thing. He had to do something, right now, for those eyes, for Elise, and for the people this system had unknowingly left behind. Elijah walked slowly down the long hallway lined with walnut wood, the recessed lighting casting a soft golden hue on each step. He didn't know where he was going, only letting his feet guide him. Everything around him, the velvet chairs imported from Italy, the towering crystal chandeliers, even the subtle scent of essential oils that lingered in the air, once stood as symbols of the success he had built, now felt strangely distant. He no longer saw beauty in them. They now seemed like makeup, masking a soul that had begun to decay. As he passed the large wall leading to the elevator, his eyes paused on the central frame, a photo capturing the front desk on the opening day of the Chicago branch. There were no golden lights, no elegant uniforms, just a scratched wooden counter and an old coffee machine. Yet in that photo, every staff member was smiling, tired but alive, lacking but proud. Elijah tilted his head slightly and recognized the face of a housekeeper who had worked with him for 10 years and left 3 years ago when her son was diagnosed with a terminal illness. He had promised to help, but then never called back. A dull ache settled in his chest. Just then, his gaze caught the large mirror reflecting his own image. Head slightly bowed, arms hanging loosely, the worn shoes still caked with mud from the city sidewalk. No longer the CEO Elijah Monroe idolized by investors, but Elijah, the young man who once drove his mother to doctor's appointments in a borrowed pickup truck, who once pressed linens into crates at the hotel laundry just to pay for college. And it was that very man who was now reawakening, not for reputation, not for shares, but because of two strangers sitting behind him in the cafe. People who had no idea they had stirred within a celebrated CEO something he thought he had lost forever: compassion. He turned back toward the lobby, walking past the front desk without saying a word. No one recognized him, and he didn't need them to, because now he knew one thing for certain. It wasn't the names printed in newspapers, but the quiet moments like tonight, when his truest self stood face to face with the fragile decency of life, that carried the power to make the greatest changes. And that night, Elijah Monroe decided he would not let it all end in silence. Morning light spilled through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the breakfast area, casting pale golden streaks across the marble floor like quiet ribbons of silk. The scent of freshly baked croissants, the rich aroma of dark roasted coffee, and the soft clinking of cutlery against porcelain formed a gentle symphony, the kind of luxury only top-tier hotels like Luxora Heights could provide. Elijah had arrived early, sitting alone at a secluded table tucked behind a stone column near the window, his weathered coat still damp with the remnants of the night's chill. He wasn't eating, just sipping black coffee slowly, eyes fixed on the lobby. And then they appeared, Noah and Elise Bennett. They entered the space as if walking through an invisible wall, their backs held straight and steps deliberately calm. Elise wore the same gray cardigan, pulled tightly around her as if it were a fragile suit of armor, and Noah still wore his wrinkled flannel shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal calloused wrists. They chose a table in the corner, away from the morning sun, away from curious glances. Elijah quietly observed as they arranged their breakfast, a single croissant split in half, an apple sliced into thin pieces, two hard-boiled eggs neatly placed on a white plate. Nothing was excessive. Nothing was wasted. Everything was shared, not out of courtesy, but because that was all they had. And in that restraint, Elijah saw a beauty deeper than any fine cuisine he had ever tasted. A beauty in sharing, in perseverance through weariness, in quiet love that didn't seek attention. He inhaled deeply, exhaled slowly, then stood up. His hand trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of knowing he was about to enter a moment that could change someone's life. Elijah approached their table, his voice soft but steady. "May I sit with you?" Noah looked up, surprised but not unwelcoming. "Of course." "I'm Jake," Elijah smiled, introducing himself like any ordinary traveler. Elise returned a light handshake, her eyes cautious but not cold. In that moment, three people, a disguised CEO, a mechanic, and a part-time teacher, sat together at a small breakfast table. No business cards, no titles, only conversation and listening. Elijah knew he couldn't change the entire world, but he could change this day for those two people. And sometimes that is enough to begin something much greater. After a simple yet deeply moving conversation, Elijah left the table with a faint smile. He didn't say much, only wished them a good day, and mentioned that if they were still around tomorrow, they should try the sourdough pancakes, a dish not on the menu, but the chef would know exactly what to do if someone said, "Jake mentioned it." Elise tilted her head in quiet curiosity, while Noah simply nodded with a smile. They had no idea that the man who just walked out of their lives was the very one holding the fate of the entire hotel chain they were temporarily staying in. Elijah left the dining area and walked briskly toward the front desk, where the young receptionist, Sienna Green, was still reviewing the morning checkouts. He leaned slightly to the side, lowered his voice, and spoke with calm precision. "Ms. Sienna, I need a favor, but I hope it can stay confidential." The young woman paused for a moment at the seriousness in the voice of this plainly dressed man, but quickly nodded. "Of course, sir." Elijah spoke clearly. "There is a couple, Noah Bennett and Elise Monroe, in room 1017. They're scheduled to check out this morning. I'd like you to waive their entire bill, including tax, and refund any charges to the card on file if there are any. No explanations. If they ask, just say an anonymous guest heard their story and wanted to do something kind. Do not mention my name under any circumstance." Sienna furrowed her brow briefly, clearly surprised, but her professionalism quickly returned. "Yes, I'll take care of it right away." Elijah gave a small nod, then turned to leave. But he wasn't finished. After taking a few steps, he turned back, his eyes meeting Sienna's with quiet conviction. "One more thing," he said slowly. "Tonight, book them a table at the rooftop restaurant, by the window. Tell them it's a gift from the hotel in appreciation of their stay, but do not mention who arranged it. And make sure the chef prepares something special. Don't let them order like regular guests." Sienna, now fully aware that she was witnessing something out of the ordinary, gave a small nod. She didn't ask any further questions. Not because she was afraid, but because there was something in the man's eyes that told her what she was about to do, though not covered in any training manual, was exactly the right thing to do. And in that moment, amid the polished rhythm of a luxurious morning, a quiet decision was made. There were no applause, no cameras, only kindness, trust, and a CEO who had just remembered why he had ever begun. Elijah didn't leave the hotel right away. He stood near the floor directory, one hand pretending to read the event schedule while the other was buried deep in his coat pocket. From that spot, he could quietly observe the front desk without drawing attention. Time passed slowly, then precisely at 10:53 a.m., the elevator opened. Noah and Elise appeared, pulling a worn gray fabric suitcase with frayed handles. Noah wore his oversized denim jacket again, and Elise held a paper coffee cup, her hair neatly tied back. They still looked tired, but the heaviness in their eyes from the previous night had lifted. Something in their posture said that, for the first time in months, they had slept through the night. Sienna saw them from across the lobby and greeted them with the same warm smile she offered every guest. "Good morning, Mr. Bennett and Ms. Monroe. I hope you had a pleasant night." Elise nodded gently, while Noah handed over the room key card. "We're here to check out." Sienna tapped a few keys, her eyes flicking quickly across the screen before pausing for a beat. She looked up, her voice calm but clear. "Actually, there's been an update to your file." Noah and Elise exchanged a glance. "Last night, a guest overheard your story and wanted to do something kind. Your room has been fully paid for. Additionally, a dinner has been arranged for you tonight at the rooftop restaurant, window seating, special menu. It's all been sent as a gift. No name was left, only a note that said, 'Believe that kindness still exists.'" Elise froze. Her hands trembled slightly, and the coffee cup nearly slipped from her grasp had she not caught it with both hands. Noah remained still, his face stiff, as if his mind was trying to catch up with what he had just heard. Then he inhaled deeply, his shoulders relaxed, and from his throat came two simple words, heavy with emotion. "Thank you." No one asked any more questions. No one doubted it. They simply stood there trying to hold themselves together in the middle of a grand, luxurious lobby where no one would have expected that a silent act of kindness could bring such release. As they walked away from the front desk, Elise took Noah's hand. She said nothing, but the grip said it all. Elijah stood behind a large column, still wearing the same worn coat, not moving. Not because he was hiding, but because he understood that if this was truly a gift, then that moment needed to belong fully to them. No one stepping forward, no one explaining the lesson. Just them, walking out through that door with their heads held a little higher and hearts a little lighter. Elijah smiled, and in that instant, he felt something deeply and unmistakably clear. Sometimes, the most important decisions a CEO ever makes don't happen in the boardroom, but in the quietest moments of silence. 1 week later, Elijah Monroe sat alone in his office on the 34th floor of the Luxora corporate headquarters in Manhattan. Outside the glass window stretched the familiar skyline, towering glass spires reflecting the gray sky, a constant stream of traffic pulsing like the lifeblood of a city that never sleeps. But he wasn't looking outside. In front of him sat a single yellowed slip of paper, its corner creased, placed deliberately on the flawless ebony wood desk. On it, 7 handwritten words. What if one night could change everything? Elijah rested his elbows on the desk, fingers brushing lightly over the fading ink. That question had not left his mind for days. He had sat in this very office to approve million-dollar proposals, expansion strategies across Asia, and quarterly reports that outperformed expectations. Yet none of those had moved him the way that one night in Chicago had. He remembered Elise's words, "Just one night to feel normal." A simple sentence that had pierced the cold walls of executive thinking, shaking everything within. He stood up and walked to the filing cabinet in the corner. One few people touched anymore. In an old drawer sat a black notebook with a faux leather cover, its silver edges worn thin. He brushed off a layer of dust and opened to the first page. The words he had written in blue ink more than 20 years ago appeared clear as day. "We do not rent rooms, we return breath." When he wrote that, Elijah had been living in a shared apartment with 3 roommates, barely scraping together enough to lease his first property, but he had believed in it, and now he believed again. Elijah returned to his desk, opened his laptop, and started a new document. The title he typed, Horizon Hope. A quiet initiative, no marketing, no press release. Designed as an internal fund embedded in every Luxora hotel. Frontline staff, trained discreetly, would have the authority to propose assistance for guests in vulnerable situations, financial hardship, medical need, displacement. No paperwork, no complex approvals, just human instinct and a timely decision. A dinner, a free night, a quiet room. It wasn't much, but sometimes those small acts kept people from falling apart. When he finished, He picked up the phone and called the head of operations. "Brenda," he said, his voice resolute, "I've just sent you a document. Apply it across all branches. No public notice. We'll do this the right way. No noise." On the other end, Brenda simply replied, "Understood." And Elijah knew this call wouldn't be recorded as a milestone in the financial report. But for him, it was proof of something simple. Some things don't show up in growth charts, but carry more impact than any business strategy. Elijah drew a line through the words at the top of the yellow paper, then wrote a new sentence, the ink bolder than before. It already did. Spring returned to New York with a fresh light streaming along the glass avenues, casting a gentle golden hue onto the busy corners of the city like a promise unspoken. At the flagship Luxora Heights Hotel on Fifth Avenue, the largest ballroom was being prepared quietly, with no banners, no branded logos. Rows of velvet-covered chairs were arranged in perfect symmetry, and on the stage stood only a simple wooden podium and a faded nameplate with 3 words, Horizon Hope Initiative. No one truly knew the purpose of the meeting. Some thought it was a management orientation. Others assumed it was to announce a new internal bonus program. But as branch managers, department heads, and veteran staff gradually settled into their seats, the atmosphere began to shift into something more solemn than usual. In the third row, a couple was quietly escorted in. Elise wore a navy blue dress with a silver-gray silk shawl draped over her shoulders. Noah wore a borrowed blazer, slightly too big, the collar folding awkwardly. They sat down without a word. Elise leaned over and whispered, "What are we doing here?" Noah gave a small shake of the head. "I don't know, but I think something is about to happen." The lights dimmed. A single spotlight lit the stage. No effects, no introductions. Elijah Monroe walked out in a dark blue shirt, sleeves rolled up, no tie, no prepared speech. He stood there like an ordinary man, not a CEO. "Thank you all for coming," he began, his voice low and steady. "I won't take much of your time. I just want to tell you a story." And then he told it. About a winter night in Chicago, about a cup of black coffee and 2 voices from the table behind him, about a woman who just wanted one night to feel like she still belonged in the world, about a man ready to sleep in a car so his wife could rest. He spoke without a script because that memory had carved itself deep into his bones. Then Elijah looked straight into the third row. "Noah, Elise, if I hadn't heard you speak that night, I wouldn't have remembered why I started. And the Horizon Hope program, the one every Luxora hotel will now implement, is a gift born from your story. A quiet initiative, no recognition, no media, with only one goal, to help someone, just once, breathe again." The room fell silent. Elise raised her hand to her mouth. Noah sat up, stunned. Elijah stepped down from the stage and walked toward them. He extended his hand. "I told you the pancakes were real, didn't I?" Elise let out a tearful laugh. "You're Jake?" Elijah nodded. "I'm me. And the 2 of you reminded me of who I used to be." No one clapped at first. Only glances were exchanged between colleagues, between those who had once believed kindness was naive. But then applause broke out. Clear, resolute. Not for the brand, not for the title, but for something that had returned. Dignity. And when Noah silently squeezed Elise's hand, Elijah knew just one night, one meal, one quiet decision was enough to change not just a life, but an entire way of believing in each other within spaces that had once felt cold. And that, more than any triumph, was the reason he was still in this business. In the cold world of business, it is often the smallest moments, a glance, a quiet whisper, that become the catalyst for transforming an entire system. A CEO may write strategies across hundreds of pages, but what customers remember most is compassion that asks for no recognition. If this story has touched you, please like and subscribe to help us spread kindness. And don't forget to leave a comment with the words "for one night" if you too believe that just one night can change a life forever.